All right, welcome everybody to the third and final session of using ACPF outputs in watershed planning and implementation. Uh, Today, we're going to talk about Andy Assel from Iowa is going to talk about considerations for presenting ACPF results so that they match your goals in the watershed planning process. You're going to get a little practice evaluating some of the ACPF outputs. And then for the second half, we'll hear from several state and national folks working in this arena, talking about how they're managing ACPF activities and some of the resources available to you to do your work. So before we jump into Andy's presentation, I wonder if people have any questions from the past two sessions that they want to raise. If you could just put those in the chat, that would be great. And you know what? I never checked the spreadsheet this in the last couple hours. Let's see what we got there. All right, nothing new there. Any other questions that people are interested in right now? Either the technical content or some of the content from Wednesday or from Monday. Silence my phone here. That was a faux pas. All right. Well, hearing nothing, I'm going to introduce Andy Assel from Iowa DNR. And Andy, if you would stop sharing. If you would introduce yourself and you can share your presentation.
All right, thanks, Marcel. Let's see. Sure. See if I can get this loaded right.
And while he's doing that, I'll point out that watershed capacity assessment. Did that worksheet make sense to people? Do people have any questions about that generally? Because as Andy goes through some of these issues, he's going to be referring to some of the questions on here, and it's really meant to be a holistic set of questions to sort of help you think through what you have in place to be able to do some of these watershed projects and the ACPF specifically, and what are the resources you might need to build up to do some of this work.
I think I'm getting my order of operations messed up here in terms of getting it into PowerPoint mode here. There, there.
That looks like the right presentation. Now, if you want,
Okay.
can you switch?
Yep.
You're looking at the wrong screen. If you want to switch that display settings.
Okay. Yeah, that's the
Top
part I was worried about.
top left.
Top left, show display
Display
settings.
settings
Swap.
and swap. There
Up
you go.
better.
Perfect.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Well, yep. As Marcel said, I'm Andy Estelle. I'm embedded in the Iowa Department of Natural Resources Section 319 team as a GIS analyst there. I also support the DNR's water monitoring program, lake restoration program, SRF, and I also work with James Martin, who's also on this call quite closely, who is with the Iowa Department of Ag Land Stewardship on a lot of our water quality initiative statewide programs, which is basically our vehicle for implementing our nutrient reduction strategy for reducing the hypoxic zone down in the Gulf of Mexico. So as Marcel alluded to, the handout that the watershed capacity assessment is going to be something that you can follow along with during this presentation. Most of these slides will say, go to section 6 or go to section 3. So, this capacity assessment, as we're going through this, you can read through some of the questions and kind of think to yourself, how does this pertain to the project you're in with the all the partners that you're involved with. So it's a nice helpful sheet and can help you gauge where you're ready to go, where you may need to do some work as you're trying to incorporate ACPF into your project. We'll start off with the users of ACPF in terms of the outputs. First off, you're gonna have your conservation partners. A lot of times these will be the folks that will be spearheading the project. You'll have your local, everybody knows you get your local NRCS and Soil Water Conservation District staff. I'm trying to minimize something here. So, yeah, most people realize that these are going to be the folks that know a lot about the biological, the socioeconomic relations of the watershed, and also like local hydrology and geology. Your federal and state and local agencies, often the people that are providing the money to, not only implement BMPs, but also can provide, the technical, operational, financial support for the project. And not only just the project, but also with ACPF, and then just your partner organizations. Most people that have been in the watershed world for long enough realize that partners make everything. Most good projects that are successful is because you have strong partnership, participation, within the conservation partners and the individuals and communities involved. So, speaking of the individuals and communities, you have your community leaders. These might be your early adopter type landowners. Let's see, let's see here. Just could be a landowner just owns a lot of land in the watershed. It's just basically anybody that kind of the community people are familiar with this. People in the community know who to go to, or kind of coalesce around. Um, and then just the basic community. These this could be, you might have a local watershed group. And in Iowa, it's kind of funny. We've got people in the watershed community. It seems like a lot of people are worried about water quality, and it seems to attract a lot of brewers in the state. So a lot of them become active members in our local watershed projects. But I just want to emphasize that you want ACPF is just an opportunity to build relationships as you're doing your planning and implementation throughout the lifespan of the project. So, how can it help, or what are its uses? Just upfront, outputs of the ACPF can help you before you even go out into the field to give you kind of an idea of what you're going to might be up against in terms of, you might look at the stream power index and see that there's quite a few areas within a landowner's property or just within a general vicinity or general area of a watershed that gullies are going to be an issue, and you got a pretty good idea where they're at. Some people like to take the maps out with them when they're going out and doing the field visits. Some people just kind of look at that before they hop out of the truck and have that in the back of their head and interact with the landowner that way. So kind of comes down to we're getting to that society of the local watershed there, to make the best call on what you think is most appropriate considering the audience you're going to be presenting this to. You can also target different practices across different areas of the watershed in terms of your outreach and outreach or prioritizing areas. So, upland areas, you might want to be doing tile drainage management. Side slopes, you might be wanting to focus on wascobs. Just no two watersheds are exactly the same, just like no two watershed projects are the same. So it might help you kind of divide and conquer the issues that might be spread across the watershed. And also it gets people into thinking about, rather than just their own land or their neighbors and whatnot. Kind of promotes your watershed thinking there. Um, Starts to get you to kind of think about how you might how you might combine practices to rather than relying on just one practice to solve a problem. How might you do like some treatment train type activities or consider areas that you already have pretty well protected and help you locate areas that might need a little bit more work than others. Um, and it kind of gets you away from, I had an old supervisor that used to call it the random acts of conservation, where you might have the capability, you might have a spot where somebody might want to do something, but maybe there's a better alternative out there, so that might work better for in terms of water quality and for the landowner. And kind of along the treatment train idea, you can start thinking about multi-landowner projects. One example in the ACPF might be, a nutrient reduction wetland that might influence more than one landowner. Gives you the capability to maybe see what that might look like on the ground before approaching the landowners and kind of get uh, get a discussion going between not just one person but multiple folks. So, and of course, funding proposals. All agencies like to see pretty maps with what you're planning on doing, why you're doing it. It gives you powerful graphics and numbers to to justify why you're planning, um, why you're implementing things the way that you plan to implement. So, too far. So, in terms of the considerations, the ACPF, of course, you got to tailor it to your audience, and your audiences are going to vary widely. You'll have you'll have the landowners, the local community group, as a whole. Um, a lot of times, sometimes I know in the case of Iowa soybean, a lot of times they would run the ACPF, or before they even ran the ACPF, they would talk to the local landowners and get a general idea of what they were going to find acceptable in terms of implementing BMPs. There might be some BMPs they're not interested at all, and that might steer you towards an alternative use. Um, the good old use of the word target. It's like, don't do it. But um, it just has a very negative connotation. So, in terms of, all good planning, it's words like priority or precision or enhancement might be words that you might use when you're discussing implementing BMPs and on the landscape. It's important to know that this is not a prescriptive tool, or it's not a prescriptive tool. You don't put BMPs exactly where the ACPF tells you to. It just kind of gives you a general idea of the conditions are more than likely suitable there. Um, you're still going to have to go out and go do a field verification to go make sure it's a model. It's like everybody's heard, all models are wrong. So still going to need to go out there, visit with landowners, or go visit sites, see if the ACPF actually um, spit out something realistic. So, and finally, considering privacy, this kind of goes along with how you might consider providing, presenting the information to landowners. So, a lot of times, you just uh, don't really want to have names and that type of stuff on maps. Maybe for the office, it might be fine, but if you're presenting it to the local community, it's like just stay away from doing this. So, in terms of integrating the ACPF into your planning process, these upcoming slides are going to be available on the site there, just where we found the watershed capacity assessment sheet. But got to ask yourself, what tools or methodologies do you already have in place, or where you have deficits? So,
See, Andy, I'm going to pause right here. And could you share the poll that we've got? I'm interested to see if people are more likely to be using the NRCS conservation planning framework, or if more of you are using EPA, or if you're using both, or neither. And if you're able to share those results when people have responded, that would be great.
I am looking for that. Hold on one sec. I thought, well, we have 70% of folks responding, so thanks for that. Let me see how I can share it.
Yeah, and I can't get at it, so.
Oh, okay. Well, it does look like we are seeing 40% of folks are saying they use NRCS. 30% are saying EPA, 9 element. 7% both, so not many are saying both. And 6 are saying neither. So most folks are using one or the other, kind of split between NRCS and EPA. I'm going to see if I can share it out, but I wanted to give you the highlights.
That tells us what we need to know. Go ahead, Andy, if you wanna.
Well, the good news is they both have they're pretty strongly correlated there. Now, there's our poll. Okay. Well, in terms of NRCS, you can look at this two different ways. You can look at this at the down at the field level. Um, Essentially, so that's all you figure out what type of assessment data do you actually have available. This might be going through Conservation Desktop. This might be information that somebody else might have compiled. Um, you can go in and go look at CART and see how some of these ACPF tools might rank. Um, you can use and basically throughout the entire process, it's like you can take the output maps to help score and rank program applications. Go back and compare those to critical areas, which might be, fields. You might have critical areas based off field slope and runoff risk. Just kind of can figure out what kind of tools do you already have there at that field scale. Alternatively, maybe you're looking at the area-wide planning. A lot of this will be, a lot of this will, it's just a bigger scale, basically. It's like figure out figure out what the problem is, what kind of, how you might go about addressing these, like which BMPs will work best given the landscape. Again, what kind of models or data sets or just local information do you have throughout the watershed? And from there, kind of take a step back and see where you might have overlap between your different sources of data, and take a look at what your solutions might be, your backup plans, and then try to make a decision on, okay, once you have everything priorities, moving on to the implementation of those. And as you succeed and fail in terms of implementing different aspects of like ACPF BMPs or the rest of your priorities, go back and update that information, reevaluate it. Is there any other information that you found out during the course of the project? Incorporate that into there. But this is the one that I'm more familiar with in terms of the EPA's 9 element plans. Basically, it's identify causes and source of pollution, which is typically your 303D list, and a lot of times you'll have some kind of a load reduction target, typically from a TMDL. But with the ACPF, you can use for some of these reports, you can generate stream networks that are going to match your elevation. You're not relying on NHD. It gives you a little bit more of a real world look at how water moves through the watershed. Where do you have areas of high runoff risk? where you're going to have ephemeral gullies, yep, ranges to depressions. Just looking at your field assessments, more targeted, incorporate the ACPF outputs into how you might make your management measures and define your critical areas. Um, Basically, you can use this information to strengthen your funding proposals after you've generated a catalog of practices. Um, Use it and yeah, I'm trying not to just go read through these, but yeah, it helps you to again facilitate the conversations with the partners, set a schedule, figure out what your milestones are going to be, update and kind of use that to update plans, and uh, and then finally, just I think everybody that's with the EPA, it helps to helps to quantify how your progress with the project. So, and might um, help you decide where you may need some monitoring to get a finer handle on. You think you may have addressed the problems, but you want to make sure that it's actually helping out water quality. But this is kind of how this is a slide borrowed from Carl Gash. He's the 319 coordinator up in Wisconsin, and was formerly with the Iowa Soybean Association here in Iowa. But he kind of breaks this down in terms of the scale of projects that are going on in Wisconsin. Kind of breaks down the goals, the plans, the agencies, and the tools. You can see the chart here, but just basically who's responsible in Wisconsin when they're generally trying to incorporate ACPF into their planning. What those plans might be, what plans might already be in place, what the goals of um, are looked at from within, each which entity that might be involved with the partners, and then basically, where do they apply ACPF at different levels of the depending on what scale we're looking at throughout the state. So, and ACPF requirements. This I don't know how you are. Well, no two projects again. It's like are going to have the same exact capacity. So you're going to have to ask each other who's capable of running the project, and that's largely dictated on okay, you got expertise. How comfortable are people in an ArcGIS environment? It does take some basic proficiency. You have to understand what geodatabases are, how they store data, how to edit information, and some basic tools and how those typically run. It really helps to know if you know the local landscape and what might already be on the ground. In terms of time, this can vary, but generally speaking, it might take 2 days in practice just to get kind of trained up and figure out how the model works, where you have to invest a lot of time and where you're just pushing buttons and it's spitting out information. One of the most time consuming aspects of running the model is you're typically dealing with a LiDAR elevation model that doesn't know where culverts are, or there may be artifacts in the LiDAR that cause the water to kind of artificially dam up, like maybe there's a tree across the stream, but that requires going in and making little, like a lot of people call them cuts into the DEM of the LiDAR and rerunning a process that kind of corrects the LiDAR so that the water flows through it smoothly and most realistically as it possibly can. Running the ACPF tools, that's half day if you've got a real simple watershed. It might take a little bit longer if you live or if you're looking at a really highly dissected landscape. And then, this can vary widely, developing the output into display maps. We'll get to that in the next session, but, just making paper maps, that could take a half day, a day, a week. It's kind of depends on how much content you choose to include, what information vehicle you use to display the data. And it does require for software is ArcGIS Pro with a spatial analyst extension. If you have a GIS analyst, they should be able to tell you what tools they have. It also requires, there's also an extension that's put out by Utah State called TAU-DEM. And that's required as well, but it is free. So just being able to install it on your machine is probably the only thing that needs to be checked in terms of, depending on how locked down your person's IT department have them. But I would, make sure you guys hopefully already know where this address is, but there's a lot of tutorials on the ACPF website here. So um, go through there and flip some rocks and look through there. You'll find a lot of nice case studies as well as instructions on how to handle particular tools embedded in ACPF and considerations. So should we just go ahead and rip right into part 2 here, Marcel?
Yes, that would be great. I guess open it up for questions at this point, and I'll add on that last slide. I don't think the current version, the newest version doesn't require TAU-DEM anymore. Do I have that right, Josh?
Yes, version starting at version 6, TAU-DEM is not needed.
Okay, good to know.
Great. Didn't update that. Any other questions on all of this? And just, I mean, you've been hearing some of this in the last 2 sessions, but any other questions about how the different considerations as you're figuring out how to use ACPF? All right. Well, Andy, go ahead and talk about some maps with us.
Okay, the fun part. So, as I just kind of was starting to get into at the end of the last session, there's a lot of different ways that people have chosen to present the ACPS results. And, a lot of it, again, gets back to which audiences are you trying to reach? That has a lot to do with, choosing what media format you want. What are you going to display? You're probably not going to be put too many wascobs if you live in a super heavily glaciated area, or basically choosing the appropriate outputs to match the project and the goals of the project. And also, once you run the model, you're not done. You need to take the outputs of ACPF and produce and compare these to other tools that you might already have to help kind of filter out practices that might not be suitable. One thing ACPF does not take into account is the presence of existing BMPs. So that's one of the most basic steps that you should be doing once you get the ACPF results out and start making maps. So yeah, like I said, what's the best for the audience you have? You don't have to just choose one. You can pick multiple strategies, just depending on what makes the most sense to present it to people. Some of the more commonly used ones are, your basic static maps that you might that are just used for printing out. Some people have incorporated them into like what interactive web maps. If you have any familiarity with ArcGIS Pro, there's a kind of a side application that's called Story Maps, where you can basically build web page with interactive maps in it. And then you can also serve the outputs out as a GIS data set that is called REST data service. So that is distributed through basically a web server. So other people use slideshow presentations. That's always nice, or they might have a video of going through the results and taking that all sorts of different directions in terms of just looking at sites and discussing them. So here's one that James made that in terms of a static map. This is a fairly small watershed down in southeast Iowa, but a lot of times these are the good old school ones. They're one of the most easiest ones to produce. Great to put into the funding proposals. You want to consider the appropriate scale if you have a pretty good project area or a pretty good sized project area. Maybe making one map of the entire watershed with all the possibilities isn't going to be all that useful. So in that case, a lot of folks will make like a watershed atlas. Um, that might show a couple sections at a time. You can see in the upper right, this one has an index map in the upper right, but this one kind of spells out all the different possibilities within this small area of the watershed. And after you have 20, 50, however many maps it takes to make this atlas, you can quickly, well, just like an atlas, quickly go through it and go to the spots you need to go and use that to present the information. And if you have a GIS analyst, they should be able to figure out how to make these with in ArcGIS Pro. It's now called the Map series, so it's not terribly difficult to get these up and going with a little experimentation. In terms of using web resources, here's a case where the BMPs have been converted into a KML file that can be dropped into Google Earth. You could probably put it into some of this stuff. You could probably put into Google Maps as well. So then you always have it on your phone as you're going out into the field. So there's also with ArcGIS Pro, there's also a capability to leverage what's called ArcGIS Online. Here you can use a basic map viewer to present the data, or there's also several other different plugins in ArcGIS Online where you can dump all the information you need into this online web mapping service and do a lot of fun things with it. You can build upon the outputs of ACPF results and build forms. So if you have a project coordinator that's out there talking to landowners, they can keep track of, yep, this landowner's interested or this one's not, and they can enter this into a form. If they're doing field visits, they can update the ACPF information to say, oh, we're deeming this inappropriate, or oh, this looks like a really good site. They can go characterize it that way. And can you use this along with other priority data sets, like maybe you might want to put out the runoff risk in here. Maybe if you had an output of terraces or something like that, you could kind of use that to prioritization on the fly. And I alluded to the story maps up on the ACPF website. There's what is it? There's a resources page. There's tons of examples of what people have done with ACPF in order to present it to the public. And present it to landowners, large groups. This allows you can, in addition to adding interactive maps, you can also insert videos, you can add narratives. So it almost becomes kind of a standalone website. So, and this is a case of where USDA, the Ag Research Station up in Ames, when they were developers of ACPF for Iowa, they went through and they ran a saturated buffer tool for the entire state. So this is an example of where this data set sits on a server that you can, with your GIS software, you can connect to that GIS server, bring this information in, so you don't have to download, a large data set, but you can bring this into your GIS data sets and use this, with all sorts of other data. So you don't have to just look at the outputs of ACPF all on its own. You can start comparing it to other things. And these are all things that a GIS technician will know about, but that you might want to help in guiding them. What scales in the map are appropriate. We kind of already touched on that. The inset maps, how to do that. All the cartographic aspects of it. What size is most appropriate? Do you want 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17? What's going to be the most useful? Basic symbology. But these are the type of things that you're going to need to your GIS folks should be aware of. So, and again, tailoring the outputs to the audience content. This map over to the right was when I was first starting to run ACPF back in like 2015. This is one of the first ones that was done in Iowa, and I got done with it and quickly started calling Dave James and Sarah Porter and Tomer and was like, okay, I got this. Now what do I do with it? It's like, here's something you could do, but you shouldn't. And you'll see on the bottom there's a scale for Iowa has where we have our existing BMPs. We've got an inventory of that. And these were all the outputs of the ACPF there at the beta version. And it's like, okay, how do I do this? And it's one of those things that the first thing you learn is like this you can overwhelm things. So be strategic in how you're displaying this data. And again, I keep hammering on this. Incorporate more information if you can. In this case, if we were just looking at riparian buffers and waterways, maybe it would make sense to add. It would make sense to add grassed waterways in the stream network in here, but keep it as clean as you can, and it might require making several different data or several different series of maps depending on whether you're addressing sheet and rill erosion or have riparian issues. So keep all that in mind. And also, it helps to get familiar with a lot of the ACPF processes, even if you are not a GIS person. Kind of go through the help document and kind of understand what the data inputs are. And how the program is making decisions. It does use a lot of the field office technical guide information to decide where to cite these practices. So understanding how the basic model functions, but you can also use it to drive other data collection or other modeling. This is one of the things that in Iowa for most of the watershed projects, we typically go out and do a field survey, like a windshield survey, to go out and assess land use and residue percentages and tillage practices. In this case, you'll see on the far left, this is an area down in southern Iowa where I don't know how well you'll see it, but there's a federal highway that runs through the middle of this watershed, and it gets kind of dicey stopping on the shoulder of the road. There's a lot of trucks in this area. It's also heavily dissected, so you don't always get a clear view of what might be back over the hill. So the one in the middle kind of shows the result of where we're going out and assigning land uses to this and tillage. And then the far right, this is all done on a mobile or on a phone. The crop rotation and the general land use that we that are displayed there is circled right there. That it comes directly from ACPF after we have made corrections to the field boundaries. So in this way, we correct the field boundaries for the land use assessment, and then we're poised to use those same field boundaries to run the ACPF model. And hidden in this is a unique each row crop field or each one of these land units has a unique ID to it. So that will be retained in ACPF, and it will also be retained in what becomes of this as a sheet and rill model. So we can start. We have the same IDs for the from the sheet and rill model, and they'll correlate to ACPF. So then we can start comparing apples to apples when we're making our decisions and comparing the outputs to determine our priorities. This is one where James has done some digging. This is kind of a quote that he used for some of his higher ups, but ACPF does provide summarization for each one of these field boundaries. What's been going on there the last 6 years? Are we dealing with the corn bean rotation? Are we doing it with continuous corn? That can help. It's a lot more effective than a lot of times if you go and rely on the soil and water conservation district offices or FSA or what have you. That takes them a lot of time to go back and dig through records. The ACPF really streamlines the process for getting that crop history and helping us get a better idea of what kind of priority numbers we might be looking at. And I think, let's see, yeah, I think this might be the last map here, but this is a case where this is kind of a combination of a lot of ACPF modeling and some sheet and rill erosion modeling. But here we've down at the ones that are color coded in kind of a red color. Those are the outputs of the ACPF or the ACPF for WASCOBs, and actually it's the catchment areas for those WASCOBs that have been modeled, and that was made possible by using some of the inputs from hydro modifying the lidar elevation. You can use that same elevation model to drive other models. So in this case, this is the catchment area above the WASCOPs. It also shows where we already have existing practices in the areas they treat in terms of ponds and terraces and existing WASCOPs. So this can be used to kind of cherry pick which ACPF BMPs are probably the first ones you want to go look at. The darker red they are, probably the more sediment they would end up trapping. So yeah, I think this is about it here. But when you're running the ACPF, be prepared for feedback. You probably aren't going to get it all perfect the first try. So, or maybe you do, but you're going to get feedback, and you're going to want to compare what people are definitely what they're interested in, whether whether they're interested in a practice or whether they're not. Get their contact information. I mean, this is probably more for like when you're doing your field visits, but um, might want to have surveys prepared if you're having public meetings to see, try to winnow down what people are interested in, and be considering what your funding opportunities might be. But and you definitely, I mentioned, ACPF does use the practice standards. It's good to have those handy. I think there are some resources on the ACPF website that kind of spell out um, some of the in ACPF, you do have some options to select from different scenarios that apply to different landforms. So that helps winnow through the technical guide, but having the technical guide right there helps as well, just to know what might be being placed, and plus just understand how the practice is being determined to be placed on the landscape. So I think with that, I think we might be ready for the hands-on exercise, unless there's any questions.
Andy, those instructions are the old ones.
Are
I
they?
forgot to delete those off there. I'll give people some instructions here.
Okay.
Any questions on what Andy's been talking about here and different ways of presenting ACPF results?
Like I said, the research or the resource guide on the ACPF website, it's a good thing to look on a Friday afternoon. So
I'll stop that. Becky, can you expand on the form you used? The form for what? Oh, for landowners. Keep going. Maybe you could speak up. I'm not sure which.
I'm sorry, were you addressing that to me?
Well, I'm seeing Becky has asked the question. Can you expand on the form you
Oh.
used for landowners? And I'm not sure which form you're referring to.
Yeah, Andy, you had mentioned a form when you're using this tool. Is that an online form that folks are filling out? Is that something that the conservation professional is filling out as you're having these conversations? Is that, yeah, I didn't know if that was linked to that storyboard or if that was just something that they were like an internal document.
I think a lot of times like projects will kind of, I'm sure there's plenty of examples out there. But I think a lot of times it's kind of project by project will develop their own form, just to, get input to get interest for what
The
people are interested in. like I think it's kind of a your own kind of deal. Like, what are you interested in? What questions do you have for the landowners? Um, maybe it's what questions do you have for your partners? You do that beforehand, but it's basically just trying to kind of focus in your what are your goals, and or how do landowners' goals line up to maybe what the partners are looking at. So it's basically just kind of get a feel of what direction you might want to take ACPF in terms of which practices might be most appropriate, or what problems might a lot of landowners be seeing on their properties. So I'm sure there's plenty of examples. I don't know if Marcel knows if there's one up on ACPF or has any examples of that. Some, I mean, I think there's been some projects that might hire Iowa State and like Jackie Comito or something to come up with, relevant, scientific type surveys, but it's kind of all over the place, I think.
All right. Thank you. I want to take just 10 minutes here for you to take a look at these questions in the chat there. I provided that link to that small group discussion questions. And make sure you have that open and the sample maps that go with it. And we're going to send you off to some small groups for about 10 minutes to read through those. And each question asks you to look at a couple of the maps that are in there and just start think about which aspects of this is good, which aspects of these are not so good, and how could these be improved. So Anne, if you want to send us off to our groups, and then we'll come back at about 1:55 Central. There we go. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had, if you're interested in some more comments on those maps and such, at the bottom of that discussion guide are some facilitators' notes that have a few other observations of ours that we've had about these maps. Don't hesitate to send us questions if you'd like to hear more about them. What I want to switch to now is hearing from some of the people around the region who are using the ACPF and get some ideas about how people are using it. And so you get an idea of what some of the resources and approaches are that are available to you. And first I'll start with Shannon Zazula from Indiana NRCS. He is the Indiana State Resource Conservationist. Shannon, what's going on with ACPF in Indiana?
Thanks, Marcel. Well, we were going hard and heavy as a strong partnership. We had a lot of individuals trained, a lot of different agencies involved. Our goal was to get the whole state assessed. Then COVID hit, and we had some personnel changes at the NRCS side and the other partnerships, or the partnership employees, and our GIS specialists took other jobs and that sort of thing. So we actually just had a conversation this week as our Indiana Conservation Partnership to get that effort going again. Again, thank you so much for this team's efforts and getting the training out there. We have several of our employees attending next week's training, starting next week. We're getting staffed up, that sort of thing. So we had great plans. They got wrecked by COVID. We're going to get back into the swing of things and see where we can get. But again, we did have several watersheds assessed through ACPF. And again, just much like we've talked about this week, it does take that GIS expertise along with then the ground truthing. And so we're going to get back into that to see where we can go. Our goal, or my goal, I guess, we have multiple goals throughout the partnership here in Indiana. But my personal goal is if we have a consistent data set across the state, now we can really start making decisions as far as prioritizing, seeing where our biggest needs are, where biggest opportunities are, comparing apples to apples, rather than this previous approach that we've had where we get one watershed done here in this part of the state, get another one done in this other part of the state, but we don't know what's in between. So it's called an unfair advantage, those watersheds that have been assessed, but we'd like to make it a fair assessment, get the whole state done. and then start making decisions based on that. And then also then training our field employees throughout the partnership on how to use the results and giving that for their toolboxes that, as we mentioned, before you go out to the farm or while you're on the farm, at least you have some good talking points to go with on that farmer. And then likewise, outreach and education. If we want to do a special effort on some water management practices, we now would have a better idea of where to promote those versus a statewide approach where they may not even be applicable in one part of the state versus another. So we have big plans. We had big plans. We're going to get those back going, and we really appreciate all the efforts you all are putting into this to help us along.
Thank you, Shannon, and I appreciate all your work in Indiana. It's great to have had your leadership over the years there. Ohio, we have August Freilich, correct my pronunciation if you like, from the Nature Conservancy in Ohio, and they've been working on running ACPF on a lot of watersheds there. Can you tell us about the work you're doing in Ohio? You are muted.
It even tells me right there that no one hears what you're saying. Thank you for inviting to chance to talk about Ohio's ACPF work. We've been involved with ACPF modeling since version 3, I think. We have a pretty wide range of partners working across the state using different approaches about how to organize to complete these ACPFs. A lot of the work using ACPF is motivated or rewarded by being able to use the results in 319 plans, the NPSIS plans. In Ohio, at least, we're allowed to use the results as potential project nominations to get certified for ACPF or for 319 grants. But Ohio is a leading producer of ag products. Corn and beans are both top 10 in the country. We've had our issues with nutrient pollution, and as a result, we've got, I think I counted over 11 different authors producing ACPF models in Ohio. We've done over 150 Huck 12s, either in progress or completed. It's hard to keep track of how many there are specifically, but that includes some that are in Indiana, in the Western Lake Erie Basin, as well as in Michigan. Michigan's doing a very interesting combination of ACPF and some other modeling to try to target their practices. Indiana, as you heard, is doing a similar process, but we've done a variety of approaches, and one of the things that I think was really neat is the idea I think it was in version 5 of the model, being able to include what we call conservation ditches or drainage. I don't know what two-stage ditches. Everybody's got a different name for what they are, but in very flat landscapes, those seem to be a popular solution. But one thing I would just sort of remember or remind everybody to think about is that the ACPF, the PF, is planning framework, and one of this ACPF will give very specific results, but you do want to try to remember that you have a lot of organizational capacity to build a community of supporters using the framework, the planning framework part of. GIS, I focus a lot on the agricultural conservation part of it, but it's the planning framework that really, I think, gives the whole thing a lot of power. But I would be glad to talk to anybody about this. I could talk for a very long time about ACPF and who's using it, but we have a wide range of partners, and I would like to get more. So
it's great to have as an NGO that just demonstrates just how important TNC the role that you can play. So encourage people to keep that in mind. Sometimes in some states, NRCS is leading, such as in Indiana, and then in some other states, there's other partners as well. And so tap into all of them because you each have different types of resources that you can use.
Well, if I could just give one more thing in there, that's a good point that we are an NGO, but I mean the other side of that is, the tool is designed to specifically produce potential sightings for NRCS practices. In the process of doing that, it creates a great deal of data, and that data is agnostic or not specific to anything in particular, which makes it very useful for other purposes. We're talking about using STEP-L and some of the other discussions, but county engineers, we've worked with them to, evaluate drainage, especially in rural counties that don't have a lot of resources. Being able to know to a better, extent how the water flows through a watershed is very valuable to them, and they're willing to try to work with us to integrate the county drainage network with this ACPF. So, water quantity management is not specifically an agricultural responsibility. And there are partners out there that are not traditional ag partners, but who are willing to help accomplish the goals. So keep an open mind about that.
I also want to acknowledge Ohio State and their extension staff who put in a lot of time and effort in the past. And at the moment, they're stepping away from it, but they've been a really important partner in Ohio too. Josh, if you could talk a little bit about what the hub has been doing in Nebraska and Kansas, that would be great.
Sure. Let me share. One second. Okay. So first off, for Nebraska and Kansas, we do have the core data available for all of Nebraska, and then essentially the eastern third of the state of Kansas. One thing the hub is looking at is potential areas of expansion, and I do know that part of Kansas is in discussions for that. So one of the key things with the core data are field boundaries. And so if you have field boundaries for watersheds that would fill up this area, please contact me and we can get it inputted into the core data set. As far as what's been done, there is a website that shows areas where results of ACPF runs have been included in some ArcGIS Online services. If you have any results that you would like to provide us, we will gladly take them. In Nebraska, there's 3 watersheds that are kind of around the Wahoo area. And then there's 3 watersheds in Kansas. These 6 total watersheds were run as part of a introductory run of the toolbox back in 2020 when we had our first contract with them. So the data is from version 3, so it may be a little out of date. However, it is able to be used. This website does show the results as they are included. You are able to, you're not able to actually save them out or anything like that. However, you can see the values. However, you can also bring them into ArcGIS Pro if you have somebody with that ability. You can search in ArcGIS Online for ACPF results. As long as it has my name as the owner, these are the ones that you would want to use. And you can bring these into ArcGIS Pro, select out individual features, save them out into your own data sets onto your local computer, and then essentially use them as you see fit. So this is a good way that we are providing this data to anybody who may want them. Also another way to visualize and then create the layouts as Andy was showing before with his data. So if anybody has any questions on that, I will be gladly answer.
That's great. Thank you, Josh. Nice example of what the work of the work that is happening at the hub in Iowa. Next, I wonder, Renee Hancock is with the NRCS in Nebraska. I wonder if you could introduce your role there and talk a little bit about what potential you see for ACPF in Nebraska.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
You bet. And you
All
will.
right, great. Thank you. I so appreciate this. My name is Renee Hancock. I am the State Water Quality Specialist in Nebraska. So my role in using the ACPF has been with developing the NWQI plans in Nebraska. We have 3 plans that we have created in Nebraska. I anticipate us using this also with the RCPP possible projects in Nebraska. And that's really interesting. The prior gentleman presentation, I'm going to share my screen because I'm going to specifically talk about how we're using ACPF. Okay. So this is the Wahoo Creek watershed, which was just being discussed, and the ACPF that was run on this. Now we utilize this a little bit different in Nebraska because so with our NWQI plans, we're working with our environmental agency, Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy. We're working with our local NRD districts when we're developing these NWQI plans. We have specific impairments that we're looking at based on the TMDLs developed by our state agency. So in Nebraska, our main impairments are atrazine and E. coli. So that's just a little bit different type of impairment pathway loss than with your sediments, your erosion that actually the ACPF is utilized. But we can utilize these and create maps for these areas when we start looking at priority areas, when we start looking at what we start rolling out the volunteer funding for producers, and we're getting a lot of EQIP applications, then we can go ahead and go in and prioritize those applications and try to hit those areas that we feel are a higher priority, a higher vulnerability, a higher risk in those areas that we want to improve. So here's an example of as far as the atrazine critical area map. And then we have the E. coli map. And we also do a lot of on the ground looking at the watersheds. I generally go out and drive section by section in addition to looking at everything on Google Earth. And so that way I have a good hands-on experience when it comes to the animal feeding operations, the livestock operations when it comes to E. coli. Having a good handle on that when we go and work with producers is very important, so that we have an idea what they have for livestock, what practices, what BMPs would help them in the reduction of E. coli. And in this area of the watershed, we have a lot of small cow-calf guys. We have guys that have 20, 30 pairs. As most of you, in Nebraska, most of the livestock and pastures utilize surface water for drinking. So helping them either with watering systems or something to get the animals out of the surface water, cleaner water for their livestock that are going to do better. That's what I'm trying to hit home with these guys and getting them to buy into voluntary practices for their operations. I think that's kind of, now I gotta figure out how to stop sharing. New slide. Where's the stop? There it is. Call me blonde. Okay.
Any questions for Renee? All right, let's hear what's going on in Iowa. Greg and James, I don't know how you want to order yourselves, or who would it be best to go first?
Go ahead and start, Greg, if you want.
Did you want?
Well, I had planned on doing a PowerPoint presentation that's not just specific to Iowa. So go ahead, James.
Okay.
I think I'm separate on the agenda, aren't I? Or not?
However it works.
You got thrown into the general Iowa population.
Well,
Did you want me to?
I can be quick and turn it over to you, Greg, if that works.
Yeah, that works great.
And then might be some of what I say might dovetail with what you're going to mention anyway. So I'm with Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship in Iowa. I'm a regional watershed coordinator, so work kind of hand in hand with the soil and water districts and partners, and kind of liaison to the state office with regards to agency program work. So utilizing ACPF now for about a decade, number of different projects and use cases. So kind of one thing that's hit home for me is I've seen a lot of static maps. I've seen a lot of GIS shape files, and I've seen a lot of employees come and go. And then so does their work in a lot of cases. So I've been really interested lately in how to blend that conservation work with watershed work and getting it into the hands of the masses. We have several hundred agency employees in Iowa, and not all of them see the ACPF outputs that have been made for their own counties because, they're busy with their day to day. So one thing it's been helpful for me to work with Josh and getting some of that data from Iowa onto the hub, with the hopes that, we can trickle it down back to NRCS so that it can be available to, the field office staff that see that stuff within their own business tool environment on a daily basis. So really looking forward to that. I think that's a potential for the future. But the other thing is, I think it's really useful, and it's been mentioned over the course of the last several meetings, that partners or new employees, it's been a big help to help folks kind of get up to speed on how to visualize practices on the landscape, especially the ones that anymore aren't coming from an ag background. Being able to kind of identify, okay, that's the type of practice that belongs here, and it's a priority practice. So it helps them sort of move in the right direction in terms of where to work. Yeah, what else? I think the other thing we've been utilizing the outputs for is in cases where we can put it together for, like what was mentioned, NWQI programs or MRBI programs, where the NRCS planning sort of guides us towards needing some of this kind of output data. So it's kind of helped speed our planning and management planning processes along. I think that's really all I wanted to mention. So I think I could turn it over to you, Greg.
Yeah, I have a quick presentation. I was going to talk about how ACPF results are being used within NRCS. So this is going to apply to any of those states where we saw the map Josh had up before, where there's actual ACPF results data, and how we're using it in our conservation planning workflow. So I'll just spend a few minutes doing that. I'm going to share PowerPoint here. Okay, are you able to see that?
Yep.
Yes, yeah. Yep, looks good.
Okay, so I'm Greg Haddish. I'm the state GIS specialist for NRCS in Iowa. I work out of our Des Moines state office. We have been looking at the ACPF tool for many years now, and a lot of the work that's already been discussed here of how this can be incorporated into our overall conservation planning workflow. So typically, if we're working with a landowner or farmer that's coming in and asking for help on setting up a conservation plan for their property, we're going to present them with lots of information about what would be suitable for their property. So I've got a screen capture here just showing some of a brochure we have that it's their guide to 32 different conservation practices that they could be utilizing. So it's a lot of information. And one thing that the ACPF can do is really help to decide for their property and the given landscape considerations, what's best, most suitable. So that's why I say it's an important part of our, and will become more and more important in our workflow as more watersheds become available. Josh already alluded to this map showing where there is currently data available through the national ACPF hub. And so we're utilizing the data and the web services that are feature services that Josh is publishing directly into our conservation desktop. So I'll just go through how all that process works. Right now, there's data on the hub in 12 different states. And if you zoomed into that map Josh had up earlier, you can click and see who had prepared that particular watershed of the ACPF data, which is important if you need to reach out to whoever produced the data and ask questions about how they did it, or you can also see what version of the ACPF toolbox was used in that. So the data is up in ArcGIS Online as a feature service. And the nice thing about it is that all of this data can be treated or utilized individually. So, stream reach, catchments, all the precision conservation practices can all be looked at and viewed individually or in combination, which is really good for us because when we bring this into conservation desktop, I'm pointing at the services directly through or to the ACPF hub, and I share them, each of those practices or output results individually. So that this is just kind of a behind the scene things, looking at conservation desktop, which is our primary planning tool that we use in our field offices. So just a quick screen captures here too about sharing the results data through conservation desktop. We can pinpoint where data is available based on service center areas and also which states have data. So for those of you on the call that are working in an NRCS office, maybe you're with the district or NRCS employee, you can ask your state GIS specialist or conservation desktop person to share out these layers that I was just showing in the previous slide so that you can turn them on in conservation desktop. So I've shared out the data to all of the all 12 states that currently have data in the hub. So within our desktop application here for conservation desktop, if you haven't seen it before, there's a mapping component, of course, so we can turn on various GIS services, map layers in the process of putting together a conservation plan. So I'm just showing an example here of grassed waterways and wascobs within that framework. And you can look at the data at various scales, obviously. So this is for a whole HUC 12 here, where all the grass waterways are within the ACPF results. Or taking it down to the individual client farm, the client's tract of land, and be able to turn those different layers on. So as you're working with the customer, you're finding out, well, what kinds of practices are they interested in? So we don't want to show them 32 different things all at once, so we can toggle on and off, like in this example, contour buffer strips or grass waterways. Maybe those are practices they would like to see. Well, how would that fit into my land based on the soils, topography, and other land use considerations? And Conservation Desktop, if you don't know, is it's our overall part of our document management system for scheduling practices. So if they're implementing these practices on their property, this is where we track all the progress on it, part of our management system. Josh has already touched on this one. We can also bring those very same map services or feature services directly into our desktop GIS software, which all of our field staff have access to as well. So if we want to utilize a full-fledged GIS and bring it in with other data sets other than ACPF, we can do that within that GIS framework and do more detailed GIS analysis and utilizing the geoprocessing tools within ArcGIS Pro. Let's see, I think Andy may have touched on this already. Sharing the results with other people outside, maybe outside of NRCS, but maybe within watershed organizations or the public in general. We can take the very same services that I was just showing you within Conservation Desktop or GIS, and we can share them out through a web application. And then finally here, we can also take this data directly to the field. In NRCS, we utilize ArcGIS field maps on our iPhones and iPads. So we can load up an area of interest, go out to the field. It's a great way of visualizing and maybe even verifying, does this make sense? Do the results of the model make sense on the property as we stand out there and look at it? So within ArcGIS field maps, you're going to see a blue dot showing where you're standing on the landscape, and then toggle on these different conservation practices, let's say, and say, does that make sense that we should be looking at a wascob in this location, for example. And then we can also collect data within that application, bring it back into the office, and utilize that within our GIS or Conservation Desktop too. So you can go both directions, taking it to the field and just visualizing it, and then collecting new data and bringing it back in. Okay, so that's all I had. If anybody has any questions or wants to reach out later, there's my email address there.
How much use do you feel like, or how long have you really had this available to the field offices now? And how are the field staff responding?
We're still in the early days, and the driving factor here is how much data is up on the hub. Because like I said, we wanted to utilize that one location for the data and make sure, it's gone through the review process that Josh and his team do with the data. So I've had a couple of field offices doing some testing for me within Conservation Desktop and just kind of getting a feel for how they can use it initially as just general reference layers, saying, okay, here's a piece of property. Currently, let's say there was no conservation practices on there, and just starting to get a feel for how the results data could could help them out in the decision-making process, that kind of thing. So it's still early days. As more and more data gets put up there, we'll be doing more. We'll be providing some training to field staff on how to utilize the data sets. I didn't mention this, but our individual field offices are not the ones running the tool itself, the toolbox itself. Rather, they're going to be the end consumers of the results data. So it'll be primarily, how can I make this a usable or a layer that I can use in my planning process?
Couple of questions coming in about who has access to this. Becky's asking, is the phone app only available to NRCS employees? And Mitch is asking if it's an NRCS internal only application.
No, for the mobile devices, iPhones or Android devices or iPad, iOS devices, that's an Esri product, ArcGIS product. So that's available to anyone. The services themselves are shared to the public, so anybody could pick up, could be utilizing ArcGIS field maps and pull those map layers in if they want to take that into the field with them.
So anybody can access them from the hub service, but
That's right.
Only NRCS people can access the conservation desktop.
That's correct. So, NRCS and district employees that have access to conservation desktop within the field office itself. But like I was showing here with the field maps, that's a completely separate app that anyone could load on their mobile device. They'd have to, there's a little bit of configuring you have to do. You set up what's called a web map that you're actually pulling into the application, so you could choose which map layers you want to include in that map. And then that's the basics of it. You can also set up other hosted feature services if you have a ArcGIS Online account that you could collect photos or collect point line or polygon data while you're out in the field as well. Was that it for the questions?
That's all I've got. Any other questions for Greg? In your agenda, I have email addresses there for all of the speakers, so encourage you to reach out to them, especially if you're in their states. Hope you can take advantage of this as a networking opportunity to find out who's doing this work in your state.
Yeah, especially, if you're in an NRCS office in any of these states, just contact your state GIS specialist, and then they'll go into Conservation Desktop and share it out with specific service center areas. This is the list for Iowa, which is the only ones I can have control over or can share to. But if somebody in Nebraska wants to look at that watershed, that's available there. They can then bring it into or turn it on as a map layer within Conservation Desktop. It's going to show up on their the map contents list here.
Thank you, Greg and James and Andy, for all your work in Iowa, leading the way on showing us what the opportunities are. All right, and finally, Ann Nardi is going to give us a little overview of the National Hub services. You've heard from Josh Obrecht already, but she'll give you a little broader picture of what's going on at the Hub.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it, Marcel. I'm actually just going to share a graphic with y'all, and I'll provide a link for it in the chat because we do have this graphic available for folks. So we've been talking a lot over the last couple of days about what goes into using the ACPF. And of course, running the ACPF or working with a JS specialist to run the ACPF is really only one of those steps. So I have here a kind of outline that talks about, okay, what are some of these steps when it comes to using the ACPF, both planning, running and collecting the data, analyzing the results, and then application and evaluation. And I wanted to just note in here where the ACPF National Hub falls into place. The National Hub, so ACPF was created out of folks at ARS, but it is now kind of maintained by a multi-institutional collaboration. So we're working to make sure that this stays openly available to folks and that it stays updated thanks to support from NRCS as well as other partners. So the hub has partners at the University of Wisconsin, at the University of Minnesota, including Marcel, and at the Iowa State, which includes Josh and many others on the call, including several other partners in tandem, which include NRCS, which you just heard from Greg and others. But what we do at the National Hub is maintain a repository of that core data, the lands and soils data, as well as of the ACPF. Josh mentioned that ACPF version 6 is recently out. So we have a technical team that's working on those updates, working on bug fixes, but also working on continuously improving the tool and creating more of that core data. We also provide training and outreach materials. So this is a good example of it. This is our watershed training. We have a technical training that's starting next week. So we also provide that for folks who want to learn how to run the ACPF. We also have a suite of resources that you can kind of learn on your own, including an online course for learning how to use the ACPF in ArcGIS. So a technical course that you can take asynchronously. So it's an online course that you can kind of take at your own time and take specific parts that you might have questions about, as well as continuously have a suite of resources that we've really gone over the bulk of which in this training. As well as offering ACPF user support. We have an ACPF forum where folks can ask questions if they're running into issues, either running the ACPF or using the results. And we also have a knowledge base on our website of common ACPF forum questions and answers. So a lot of folks have the same type of questions or run into the same type of roadblocks. So we have a knowledge base where you can look up some of the issues other folks have had if you're running into a similar one. So that's overall what the hub is connected to and our mission. We're also really dedicated to increasing the ACPF's use and utility within NRCS, both within the Midwest and beyond. So when it comes to planning and using the ACPF, really where we talk about our role as the hub is really determining your training needs and your data needs. So determining if you have core data available for your area, that's something the hub can help with. And if you do or do not, we can help in terms of training or pointing you towards the correct training so that you can either create that core data or learn how to run that, the ACPF. We also have a community of ACPF users. I won't say that it's perfect. We don't include everyone who's ever used the ACPF. It's hard to know that. But we do have a community of folks that are on our mailing list or are part of the community. And so if you're looking to convene state partners at the state, regional, or local level, we're happy to help and assist with those efforts so that we connect you with other people in your area that are using ACPF, however big that area ends up being. So those are times in your planning. There's also, of course, I think the other parts of planning, which is figuring out if you're ready to use the ACPF, kind of that readiness assessment and consulting on that as needed if you're trying to decide if ACPF is right for your organization or for your watershed and your watershed's goals. When it comes to actually running the ACPF and collecting the data, we can determine if new core data is needed. We also can help in terms of those tools. So we provide the technical training. You can see here we don't run the ACPF tools ourselves, but we do provide the technical training and can help troubleshoot with technical issues. Either we have an ACPF mailbox email that you can email with questions, or that forum that I mentioned, which really has a lot of questions on there, or you can ask questions and get questions not only from ACPF experts, but also from other ACPF users. When it comes times to analyze the results, obviously you're running it, then you're using that local knowledge and field verification. and rerunning it and updating it. But if you're saying, okay, where do these results integrate into your existing planning and watershed goals? That is something else the hub can help support, consult on. We've seen those graphics where we're talking about AC, and I know Andy talked about this earlier, how ACPF fits into 9 key element or NRCS conservation planning. So we can talk about that and how those results can better fit into your watershed plans overall, regardless of which one you're using, or if you're not using either. And then when it does provide that application and evaluation. So obviously you're going to be using the results and coordinating participation, but in terms of the hub, we only get better by getting your feedback and also by getting your results as well. So we can share those with others in the hub community or in the ACPF community. So Josh just put the link in there to the results portal, but that's another way that we can kind of connect in and make sure that if you are running ACPF, it has been run for your area, that we make sure and see it. So that again, we can just continuously approve it as a open source software that, a very powerful software that can continue to be open source thanks to the efforts of the hub and to support from NRCS. So all of these resources that I point to, and I could point to more pieces that we have. I don't think anyone has mentioned yet that we are always looking at additional tools that plug into the ACPF. Maybe folks did. I did actually missed Wednesdays. So there are tools that can look at what are the economic implications of conservation practices. And there are also tools looking at manure and where manure can be applied. So both of those are like add-on tools. So it's another piece that folks in the ACPF community and the hub have worked on and created and added as supplemental tools that can really help in terms of either that kind of outcome estimation or in looking at nutrient management. And so those are, again, other examples of things that you can find on the ACPF for Watersheds website. And of course, if you have any questions, there is a email on there or a contact form that you can put up, as well as and myself and other organizers. So that's what I have. Any questions on the ACPF hub or what we have available to help you as you're kind of taking this next step and saying, okay, I know what the heck the ACPF is now. Now I need to figure out how to use it for me. All right, Marcel, I think that was our 7 seconds there.
Thank you, Anne. You have all heard a lot of examples in the last hour and the last this whole week, the last 3 sessions here of how people are integrating ACPF into their work. Can you briefly make a statement about what, and add this to the chat? How do you see yourself using the ACPF? Just briefly, how do you, which of these examples are resonating with you? And if somebody wants to unmute and jump in, you're welcome to do that too. Producer outreach, yep. And if somebody decides, oh, I guess this isn't as useful as I thought it was going to be, we're open to the negative as well. Nutrient reduction, communications, and planning. Nora, what state are you in? Ohio, yep. Yeah, go Ohio. What are the barriers that are keeping you from using ACPF? Or what do you think is the biggest barrier that you're going to have trouble figuring out if you were going to advance the use of it in your area? Oh, and yeah. GIS skills, that is a real challenge, because every state and region has sort of solved this differently. Some people are finding the skills locally, some going at a state level. So that's a challenge. Philip sees himself integrating a runoff estimation tool with the ACPF to assess impacts of the practices on downstream flood risks. Lack of time to become proficient. Yeah. ACPF isn't, it really semi-automates some of this terrain analysis, but you still have to have the GIS skills to pull it all together. So it does take some time. All right, well, I really appreciate all of your time and engagement these last 3 days, and Kevin and Ann and I are pleased to have your participate in this course this week. Ann will be sending an evaluation to all of your email inboxes. You should look for that. And are there any other closing comments here? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a note on the survey, we do need to evaluate the training, so please we appreciate your candid responses as we help to make it better in the future. That survey will come directly from Qualtrics, so please be on the lookout for that. It won't be an email from me like I've sent after each course or after each session. It will instead be an email from Qualtrics, again, because it is entirely anonymous.
Okay, any other comments or final words from anybody? Thank you all tremendously and have a good afternoon. Thanks for joining us late on a Friday. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.